Good morning. This is the Wyoming City Schools Board of Education Planning Meeting for February. I'd like to call this meeting to order and ask for a roll call.
Mrs. Broderick?
Here.
Mr. Meese?
Here.
Mr. Thomas?
Here.
Mrs. Yee?
Here.
Mrs. Zoller?
Here, please join me in the pledge to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, we are going to review our policies. Mr. Meese, I'm turning it over to you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Jeannie. If with your permission, I will do kind of a 30,000-foot flyover of these policies, and then I'll open it up for any questions, concerns, comments. There were a fair number of policies, even though it only looks like 6 on the page. So bear with me, but I found them very interesting and actually learned a couple of things. So anyway, 161 through 167 are the policies we're reviewing. Board policies 161 through 167. The first one, 161, is regarding parliamentary authority, and this is really how we do business as a board. So essentially what this policy says is that in our meetings, as we make motions, as we second motions, as we call the roll and take votes, and consider recommendations from the administration, that's all done according to Robert's Rules of Order. So it's kind of our way of proceeding in our meeting. So for those of you who are watching, hopefully there are some on this snow day. The way that we go about our meetings, if you've been there in person or if you've watched us via Zoom, that's all according to Robert's Rules of Order. Policy 162 talks about a quorum. So basically the board cannot do business, consider motions, vote on motions, or vote on recommendations, unless there are 3 members present, a majority of the board. The bylaw, we have to have 3 board members present to conduct business for the district. 163 is regarding our presiding officer, our president. The policy states that the president shall present or shall preside at or run the meetings of the board. No surprise there. The vice president shall preside in her absence. It does also point out that if the vice president and the president are absent, any member can be designated by a plurality of those present to preside. And all that means, and this is what I learned, that actual business can be done by a quorum of members, absent both the president and the vice president. So I didn't know that was the case, but just an interesting part of the policy that's good for.
Just need 3. Yeah.
Exactly. 164, policy 164 is regarding notice of meetings. So it talks about the way the district makes public the time, place, and purposes of all the meetings of the board. It addresses regular, special, and emergency meetings of the board. Notice of the meetings that board members are entitled to, and we are as members entitled to notice of the meetings, and also how individuals can request notice of the meetings. Couple interesting things. It does point out that the treasurer will notify board members of each board meeting no later than 2 days in advance of the meeting. We always get plenty of notice in regard to that clause in the policy. It does talk about the fact that special and emergency meetings require that the board notify local media, not just post those meetings on our website. And last but most interesting to me, quote, it says, quote, that notice of meetings at which any specific type of public business is to be discussed shall be sent to all persons requesting such notice, provided that such persons supply the board with stamped, addressed envelopes for that purpose. So I'm really anxious to see Susie Hankey's shoebox full of stamped, addressed envelopes of people who've requested information from the board. Just kidding. I'm sure that Susie's far more efficient than that, but just interesting that is how the policy reads right now. So 165 has a couple different sections. So 165.1 talks about regular meetings. Talks about, and again, really no surprises here for those of us who are at meetings every month, discusses that the superintendent and the board set the agenda, that the superintendent is expected to give a report with recommendations. It doesn't stipulate a long report, Tim, but it does say a report with recommendations to the board. And that the agenda for each regular meeting shall be mailed or delivered to each board member so as to provide proper time for the member to study the agenda. So it points out that we should have time to review. We always get the agendas in plenty of time. It also points out that the board must transact its business according to the agenda, although we can change that agenda and sometimes do by a majority vote. Those are our blue sheets that we get sometimes when we either via Zoom or in person when we make changes to the agenda. So This 165.1, policy 165.1 does talk about our consent agenda, which basically allows us to handle routine matters within a reasonable time frame. And again, no surprises here, but the types of things that can be covered in a consent agenda are minutes of prior meetings, bills, hiring of personnel, and resignations or leaves. 165.2 just talks about how the district can call special and emergency meetings, and their agendas are obviously a little bit different, as we all know, from regular meetings. 165.3 does talk about recess and adjournment, and basically, due to state public meeting notice requirements, notice of a new meeting is required when we formally adjourn. So, as you all recall, when we were interviewing superintendent candidates and we adjourned a meeting, we had to let Susie know when that happened, or sorry, Rhonda know when that happened, so that she could keep those for the records of the public meetings. And also, this policy also notes that a meeting cannot be recessed from one day to the other, but it can be recessed over the course of one day. So we could meet in the morning, recess for a few hours, and meet in the afternoon, but we can't kind of keep a continual meeting going, is my interpretation of this policy, by just recessing from time to time. So moving on to 166, talks about executive session. It's a long, relatively to the other policies that I reviewed. It's a relatively long policy, talks about the types of things that we are restricted to discussing during executive session. Again, no surprises here. Personnel matters, hiring, performance, complaints, the purchase of property, any negotiations, any legal disputes, confidential matters, not only regarding state and federal law, but also about business strategy, which I thought was interesting for the community to know, that if we're talking about some kind of strategy of the district, or we're collaborating with a local business, that can be confidential. And then any emergency preparedness conversations can be handled in executive session. It does point out, of course, that the board cannot actually take action during executive session. We can talk about things. It does point out that, but we can actually vote. And it does point out that collective bargaining sessions are private. And lastly, that executive sessions can only be held at regular or special meetings, and talks about how and why board members can make a motion to have an executive session. Policy 167 talks about voting, and it reads that all motions shall require for adoption a majority vote of those present and voting. And then it goes on to specifically define the number of board members required to be present for specific kinds of motions. So, or specific kinds of motions. So, for example, for particular motions, a majority of the full board has to be there, 2/3 of the full board, 3/4 of voting members present, so on and so forth, and kind of specifically articulate some very particular times when a set of board members has to be there and present to vote. Lastly, 167.1 and .2 talk about the use of electronic mail and text messages, and the use of personal communication devices by board members. So essentially what this does is articulates the limits on the use of email and text messages relative, especially to the state of Ohio's Sunshine Law. We've talked about this as a board several times, meaning that in short, we're prohibited from making decisions via text or email. Those have to be made at board meetings and in the public, but we can, however, communicate about basic things like times and dates, what's on the agenda, or as we often do, communicate with members of the public. And 167.2 just states that board members, if they use mobile phones or personal communication devices, those must be in accordance with the district's policies and administrative guidelines, even if they're personally owned. So these are essentially acceptable use and safety policies that govern other staff members and administrators in the district. Those policies also govern us as board members. So really interesting stuff. Happy to open it up to any questions or anything you just saw that struck you as you reviewed the policies, or Jeannie, anything you want to add?
I know that the city just had a question asked of them, why aren't the minutes published faster, like the day after the meeting? And they answered back, because in Robert's Rules of Order, you can't publish minutes until the next meeting, when the board then, or in that case, the city council approves those minutes. So that was one thing that just came up recently. I thought, oh, okay, so that's good. We're both doing the same thing. That I know we have people who ask us on occasion, well, I haven't seen the minutes. Well, no, you won't until the next meeting when we approve them. That's all.
Great.
Anybody else? All right, then I'm going to go on to the superintendent's report.
Okay, thank you, Jeannie. I just have one item, a personnel item, and we are recommending the approval for a new high school second shift custodian. And that's an important gap to fill for our high school. And so that is all I have in the superintendent's report.
All right, may I have a motion to approve the superintendent's report?
So moved.
And a second, please.
Second.
Okay, Kara, thank you. All right, thank you. Let's move on to, we have 2 discussion points. So Tim, just take
We
it
did-
from one to the other.
Jeannie, do you want me to call the roll?
Oh, sorry, roll.
Mr. Meese,
Yes.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. G,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick.
Yes.
Thank you.
We knew what you meant, Jeannie.
Okay, so we're ready to move on to school planning. Okay, wonderful. I just wanted to share a few updates with regard to our current school plan, and then some initial steps that we're taking as we look at the plan for the 2021 and 2022 school year. So initially, one of the first updates I wanted to share and answer any questions about has to do with our staff vaccination process. So we've made some modifications to our process that we're using for staff just recently, which is going to allow us to vaccinate our staff even sooner than anticipated, which is great news. And so basically our staff members are going to be split up into 2 different groups. Both groups are going to both receive their first vaccination dose this coming Friday, February 12th. And so we'll call them Group A and Group B. Group A is going to be receiving the first dose of the Moderna vaccine, again, this Friday, and we anticipate that they would receive their second dose on Friday, March 12th. Beacon Orthopedics and Sports Medicine is helping to facilitate that process. They're doing a great job of making sure that our staff has all the information that they need to know to make that a smooth process. So we look forward to that starting on Friday. Group B is also going to be receiving their first dose on Friday, but they are going to be receiving the Pfizer vaccine. And we anticipate that they will receive their second dose on Friday, March 5th. And the Hamilton County Educational Service Center and Kroger's are both working together to facilitate that process. And we're getting information out today to Group B to help them understand what they need to do for their vaccines. And so as of today, everyone's going to be receiving that critical information in regards to how to go about getting their vaccines. And we're again, excited that we can expedite the process so that this will happen sooner than we thought it would, which is great news as we think about our staff working in classrooms with students as safely as we possibly can. And so we're excited about that, again, to begin as early as this coming Friday. No snow. We don't need any snow on Friday. We just need that to be a very clean process. So let's get the snow over with earlier. Shifting gears a little bit now, we're looking at the rest of this school year. And as we have in the past, we're going to continue to navigate through the rest of the school year with a very close eye on in-district data. We're going to continue to look at our ability to implement our safety protocols that we have in place and continue with all of those. And we're continuing to watch for the possibility of a new variant of COVID that could at any time show up in our region. It was interesting, this past week I was contacted by a reporter from the Wall Street Journal. And in that conversation, he wanted to know more about how we make decisions as we look back through the pandemic. What do we use to make our decisions about learning mode? So it offered a really great opportunity for me to be reflective of the past 10 months and the wonderful work that's happened in our district to do the best job that we can of keeping people as safe as we possibly can. So I shared that from the onset 10 months ago, we had always planned for our students to be in the classroom as much as possible, as safely as possible. And to do that and to support that approach, we've really relied on the science of COVID and learning throughout the entire time of our first semester about the transmission of COVID. And we've done that ourselves. We've included our science advisory team to help us learn along the way as we've shifted from one mode to another. And so basically our process has been, as the levels of COVID have increased, we've put plans in place that allowed us to provide more and more social distancing for students. And that's how we've connected our knowledge of COVID to our decision making, which has been critical as we've looked at our plan throughout like I said, throughout the past 10 months. We also talked about the potential that there is a new variant that comes up, and our plan provides that flexibility for us to move back to a hybrid learning structure, or to even go to a fully remote learning structure. Again, it's based on what's happening in our region. And so it just highlights the importance of continuing to go back to that data and watch for any potential of spread, which we're doing on a daily basis. And I think our staff has been wonderful. Our families have been wonderful at understanding that could change at any point in time. And paying attention to the things that matter have really helped us shift when it's made sense to do so. So I just wanted to share that to say that we'll continue to monitor things and be flexible and pivot if we need to. We're hoping that we don't need to, but if we do, we're ready to do that as a school district. And I thank our families and our students and our staff members for that flexibility and for being prepared for that. So, as we shift gears too, in terms of looking at next school year, we've already begun to do some of those important things. Our kindergarten registration started this week. Yesterday, there was a pre-registration link that went out. So we're anticipating our new kiddos coming in, excited to have our new kindergarten group coming in next year. We are also going to be surveying our families, surveying specifically our remote learning families in the next few weeks, so that we can get some better information on what their plans are for the 2021-2022 school year. We're trying to gauge how many families anticipate coming back to in-person learning versus staying remote. And that information will be of great use as we work with teachers, as we work with administrators, and plan for the structures that need to be put in place at the start of the school year in August. So as that survey data comes back, we'll be pulling teachers together to, again, to talk about the things that we've learned throughout the entire pandemic, identify those things that we should celebrate and keep as part of our plan, and then shift where needed to create the best learning opportunities for students. So that work is beginning now, and we will be set and ready to go for the 2021-22 school year.
Tim, has the percentage of remote families stayed roughly the same, or how has that gone?
It as we came into the second semester, it was pretty consistent with about a 75%, 25% split. We have seen more families coming back at the end of the end of the month of January. So we're starting to see more families come back to in-person learning. I don't have the percentages in front of me. I'm not sure if Susie or Ashley know those specific percentages, but I don't have them at this point. I just know that we are seeing more families come back. So it's starting to, the number of families that are fully remote are starting to decrease somewhat.
Yeah, that's good enough.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
So right now, Tim, as it stands, since we can't project, I mean, that we'd all likely still be in masks, the thought is that there'll still be remote learning option for the fall. Is that correct? Like, is that what you're saying? And then you're just trying to see what percentage, or you're just trying to look at who might still be interested in that to make that decision?
Yeah, I think it's what's difficult is, we've learned so much on a weekly basis with regard to COVID. It's so hard to know in the next 5 or 6 months what the conditions will be, especially with a new variant and the constant changing of vaccines. Right now, we don't anticipate that all students would have the potential to be vaccinated. That could change, I'm not sure. And so some of those things are hard to tell. The important factor I think to look at is right now, if we had a 75% of students who are in-person learning and 25% of students who are learning remotely, if that changed to a point where there were 2 to 3% of students learning remotely, then that would probably create a great change in how we're working with remote learners. And so when we get that information back, we'll know a lot more about the structures that need to be put in place.
Yeah. And right now too, with our numbers for like who chose to get vaccinated, is that what do you, you probably don't know that percentage. I didn't ask you beforehand. Like, was it a fair amount of people who are of staff that are getting vaccinated?
It was, and I don't have an exact percentage. Looking to Ashley or Susie, I don't know if we have that, a rough estimate of that or not.
That's my bad. I didn't ask you.
It's a great deal. It's a very large percentage. I would say it's a large
so.
percentage of our staff that are moving forward with that, though.
You'd
Yes.
say it was about what? I think I was talking over you. Sorry.
It's at most.
Most.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Thanks.
And if we've learned nothing else this year, we've learned that being flexible and changing our ways when we needed to does work. As the data changes, certainly we can meet whatever the need is, and that's something I think we've done well this year.
Yeah, I would agree, and I think that goes. There's so many facets of how that's happened, from our staff members to our students to our families. It's really been a team effort in regards to being flexible. So my appreciation goes out to everyone. It's amazing. As I talked about the conversation I had with the reporter, it's been interesting to reflect on all that we've done over the past 10 months. And the flexibility, the pivoting that we've done, and trying to support our students in the best way. Lots of good work. Anxious to move beyond the pandemic, absolutely, but lots of good work. Okay.
Okay. Facilities.
All right. If we can just shift into this other conversation, then I wanted to share my thoughts on the possibility of creating another superintendent committee, which would be the facilities committee. And this would be a committee like others that would meet regularly and have an opportunity to speak at our board meetings regarding the current state of our facilities and short and long-term planning with regard to our facilities. And there's several things that really, I think, bring this to the surface, and now would be a great time to have this routine conversation with regard to our facilities. Recently, we implemented, or we created, the business manager role. And as you know, Jan Wilking has transitioned into that role. She's done an incredible job of working with our maintenance staff and looking at all things facilities. And she spearheaded the plan for the HVAC work at the high school. She is now working to create a comprehensive analysis of our current facilities that helps to provide long-term planning. And she's also working on a permanent improvement plan that's going to be critical as we consider entering the strategic planning process. And so with all of those things in mind, I thought this would be a really good time to create this superintendent committee, which would allow for routine conversation with regard to our facilities. Where are we right now? What are our short-term plans? What are our long-term plans with regard to facilities at our primary, our middle school, and our high school level? And I think this would be much needed discussion. Rhonda and I have talked about this. Rhonda, I'm not sure if you'd like to add anything to the value that this would have on a regular basis for our board conversations.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. Some of that information has ended up landing in Finance Committee because of the financial ramifications of some of those decisions. And we just, felt like in order to give the work the respect that it deserves, and bring Jan along in that conversation, that it deserves its own home. And then we would have some parallel discussions in Finance Committee, and then, give an update at our regular monthly meetings between Facility Committee and Finance Committee. With Jan's role and the incredible amount of work that she's doing. I know Tim's working through some strategic planning. It just feels like the right time to do this, and that the work needs a home. And certainly we want some board collaboration and board input as we have these conversations. So it felt like the right time to move forward with a facility committee.
So this would end up being a regularly meeting group that looks at the buildings, first the big picture, but also zeroes in on those needed. I think about our buildings and I think of them as relatively new. And then I remember that, the high school, that's a 20-year-old build that, we're actually looking at a bond levy. We might be able to retire in a few years. And then the middle school, which I think of as a very new building, is a good 10 years into it. So I can see the need, is I guess my point.
Especially those sweet primary buildings. We know that those need some love.
It's just the right time to think about all of those needs,
right,
in one setting. When we bring things to you, we tend to bring them through finance committee or through some whatever venue, however venue they get to the board. But it's given the in-depth work that Jan is doing and the comprehensive analysis that she's doing, it's the right time to look at that and all of our facilities in totality and start to prioritize our resources along with Tim's work on strategic planning. So it feels like there's a lot of work to do and it needs a home.
I think it's a good idea. Do you see it, since it's relating, then it's going to overlap talking about it then at finance? Do you want it to be the same people, or are you okay if that's different? It doesn't matter to me. I'm happy to either do it or not do it. Like, what wastes less time, I guess, in talking about the things again? However, did you guys have a vision of how you see us being involved, or who that is?
I think like any committee, we want folks who are, passionate about the work and are interested in learning and being involved in the decision-making process. In my mind, it doesn't have to be the people who are on finance committee, and maybe some other voices and some other input would be valuable, but Tim can weigh in on that as well.
No, I agree. I think the most important thing would be someone who has an interest in that type of work and long-term planning. I view it similar to how you might, maintain your home and making sure that you're thinking about the things that need to be dealt with right now and long-term. How do you take care of your home so that you're taking care of things before they become a crisis, and that's the way that we want to manage the facilities in the district, and that helps us to utilize our resources in the best way possible. So anyone who has an interest in that work, I think could be part of that team.
I know finance has really benefited from having a couple of teachers on that committee. Are you planning for some teachers to be part of that conversation, or represent? I don't know how that, outside of the board, how you would structure that.
I think they could definitely be part of the conversation. We have not, this is the initial conversation we've had about creating the facilities committee, so we can certainly look at how that might be planned. But I think more eyes on the things that we're thinking about, short-term and long-term, are perhaps a better option for this group, certainly.
Certainly in the way that the inclusion group is formulated with representatives. I can see that. I guess I'm also thinking in terms of building, you might have a rotation going so that when you're looking at some particular problem, you could we have such a wealth of information out there in the community. We could bring in an architect, or we could bring in a builder or someone to give us a point of view. Although at a certain point, I know Rhonda would have if we're gonna send out a bid, we can't put that person bidding on our committee legally and all that other.
Right.
We'd have to look at how to especially get their information, but still give them a fair chance to be part of the solution. But I think at this point, because it's meant to be a discussion. I think everybody needs to think about whether they'd like a role. Does that seem like a good place to start next? And then talk about how we would set that up. Regular meetings. I do want to stress, I think the whole board needs to be kept informed. Over the years, I've seen 5-year spreadsheets on facilities. I've seen notes that didn't necessarily all fit together based on whatever our particular problem was we were trying to solve. But it would be lovely, as you say, to bring all that information to one place. But with the idea that this committee would then make sure that they kept the rest of the board informed.
By defining regular to you all, is that a quarterly? Are you thinking monthly? Do you not know yet? Whatever.
I would say I was thinking monthly, but Tim may have a different thought.
Yeah. No, I think that we would be at a monthly. Certainly, we would have the opportunity to update the entire board on what's happened on a monthly basis, and I think, especially as we're initiating this committee, I think it would be important for whomever's part of that to be meeting monthly as we get things started and create a structure for that team.
Are you already anticipating significant big ones coming up, as we've handled a few, kind of recently? I'm just curious about whether that might impact what either expertise or specific element of interest from a board member would determine which of us should be the ones to join.
In my opinion, the immediate work will be to review the report that Jan is going to be presenting out of her comprehensive analysis of facility needs, and then to start some prioritization. We've been focused on high school HVAC, and as we start to chip away at that, we can't forget that there are some other pieces. We still have roof work, we still have a number of other things across the district, and so it will be reviewing that report and starting to prioritize needs across, to Jeannie's point, across our 5-year plan. We sort of had some placeholders in some of those slots, and given Jan's work and the presentation of a really comprehensive analysis, I think that that's going to be really good work for some board representation to be a part of.
Yeah, I'd love to touch base with you, Rhonda, separately, just to get some more perspective. It sounds like something that would be actually interesting for me, although when Tim said it needs to be someone who also thinks about this at a high level for their house, then I started to think maybe I don't apply, but maybe I don't qualify. But
I say that's Heather.
Interested.
Heather, you're the recent expert in that area.
Yes.
I will say I learned a lot. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah. It's interesting. Like I have a newfound interest in all of it. Anyway. But Ilya, I like that. Well, when I think about long-term for my own, I was like, well, I might need it just for myself too. And it would really help whole big picture, personally and professionally.
Is there a
Heather and Ilya?
No, go ahead. Is there a timeline?
You see his sweet face when you stop putting us on committees together. Kidding. I enjoy you so much.
Jeannie was trying to say something. Jeannie was asking.
I just wondered if there's a timeline, because obviously we would have to accept this committee in a formal board vote. Were you thinking as quickly as possible? You weren't thinking today.
No.
So by the February regular meeting?
Yeah, I think if possible, if we could put that in place at that time, that would be wonderful.
Okay.
Rhonda, I don't know if you've thought February or March.
Yeah, I think if we, had some good volunteers, and it sounds like we do, if we could have some approval at the February regular meeting, and then maybe we could kick off our meeting maybe around the middle of March. We haven't run that by Jan yet, so we'll need to loop her back in.
Mm-hmm.
But that timing sounds good, because I know she is wrapping up that comprehensive analysis, and she'll be ready to at least start to engage in those conversations.
So if we give everyone a chance to do some research, we can go ahead and accept the committee idea in February without actually appointing the members, or if we're ready to go, we can appoint the members. I think because this is a committee that has some real teeth to it with monthly meetings, if one of your other assignments is going to interfere, or you're saying no just because you have some other assignments, I think this might be a good time to also discuss that. That I'm going to ask you to direct to me, and then maybe we can see if we can move people around a little bit to make sure everyone is able to commit to their responsible committee. Other than that, if you're interested, I guess the conversation should go to Rhonda, to Tim.
Yeah, you can email both of us.
Do your research and ask them all the questions you need.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. I believe we are ready to adjourn unless there is something else. Looking around here.
Nope.
Okay, then may I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
May I have a second? Good, thank you. Roll call, please.
Mr. Thomas,
Yes.
Mrs. Yee,
Yes.
Mrs. Zoller,
Yes.
Mrs. Broderick,
Yes.
Mr. Meese.
Yes.